Good evening from a frosty evening in Norway. My name is Helge Horisland, and I have the privilege to chair this meeting and to introduce this Sunday speaker, the Czech-Dutch retired banker, Brother Jaap Sadilek, who is living with his wife in their beautiful home in the outskirts of Prague in Czechia. Brother Jaap has a Masonic career that reflects his life in international banking. He was initiated in Anglo-Dutch Lodge number 5862 in London. He was affiliated to Lodge Jan Amos Comenius in Naarden, Netherlands, and subsequently to Lodge Most number 3 in Prague, of which he is the past master. He has been a deputy Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of the Czech Republic and is Grand Representative of the Grand East of the Netherlands at the Czech Grand Lodge. He is a founder and chairman of the Praga Masonica, an independent society promoting the cultural heritage of Freemasonry in the Czech lands. Praga Masonica is a member of the Inter-European Association of Masonic Museums, Libraries and Archives, short AMLA. Sadilek is a member of the Czech Society for 18th Century Studies in Prague and of the advisory board of the Comenius Museum in the Czech Republic, board of the Comenius Museum in Naarden, Holland. Brother Sadilek has given many lectures on Masonic cultural topics at home and abroad. He has organized Masonic exhibitions and contributes regularly in Masonic magazines and yearbooks in the German-speaking parts of Europe. In 2020, he co-authored a pioneering study on the topic he will talk about today, Bohemian Masonic Glass. Brother Jaap, as I raise my Masonic glass, firing glass, it's Bohemian, of course, with your native Dutch national drink, Geneva, I ask you to take the floor.
Well, thank you, Helge. Thank you very much for your kind introduction, and welcome everybody tonight. It's an honor and it's a privilege that I can speak tonight to you, and I have to thank Dr. Susan Sommers, who took the initiative, and of course I like to thank also Okan Yanusoglu, who is technical, organized, and prepared everything for me. I don't have a glass full of Geneva, just water to keep sober, but I will take you to a subject which is a special one. Masonic glass, or Bohemian Masonic glass, is something on the crossroad, on a crossing point between Freemasonry and glass industry. Two totally different subjects, but there is a cross point on which I'd like to focus tonight. It's of course a small subject, and I make it even more narrow by talking not only about just Masonic glass, but about Bohemian Masonic glass. It's a very, I would say, it's about conviviality, it's about pleasure, coziness, I will talk about applied art, arts and crafts, and that's very attractive visually. So my presentation is strongly visually oriented. I will have a lot of pictures for you. But let me now first try to put the presentation on. Okay.
We have it, no problem.
Can you see it? And now I would like to say slideshow. Yeah, can you see it? On the full screen.
It's excellent.
Okay. I'll divide the subject in sort of 4 sections. It's first starting about the habits and manners of Freemasons brethren at the table lodge. What is a table lodge? How it developed, and the character and usage around the table lodge or festive board. Then the second part is about the firing glasses, the origins of that glass, followed by focusing on the symbols, Masonic symbols, which we'll find back on the glasses. And finally, the last part, of course, about Bohemia production. Why actually the concentration on this Bohemian glass? Well, first of all, Bohemian glass in itself is one of the most, or maybe the most important and successful export article the country ever had. I'm talking about a long tradition. Glassmaking in Bohemia is 1,000 years old, as is, by the way, in Germany and neighboring countries. But also Bohemia took part in it, and particularly the product was sold worldwide already 300 years ago. That, of course, established a tradition which survives still today. In that vast area of glass products for consumer use, there was the Masonic part, which is, of course, a very small segment, and that is not 1,000 years, but no more than 300 years, or, of course, a little bit less. But what is interesting, of course, for the Bohemian lands is that the production always took place and always was exported, but Freemasonry itself in Prague, Bohemia, was for a long time forbidden. For 300 years of Freemasonry, only about 80, 90 years Freemasonry was active and could unrestricted flourish. Was about 30 years in the late 18th century, the time of Joseph II, Leopold II, time of Enlightenment. Then there is a short interwar period, 1918-38, only 20 years. Both for brief resurrection of Freemasons of 5 years, and since 1990, uninterrupted freedom for the lodges for 30 years. So it's a checkered history. But the glass production wasn't affected by that and actually continued all the time, particularly I'm talking about the 19th century, which was all the time actually without Freemasonry in Austria and in Bohemia. But export was massive in those days. And now you find, if you go to World Masonic or other museums, you'll find worldwide Masonic glasses there, which are sometimes marked as Bohemian or Czech, sometimes Central European, but that's about as far as the description goes, as there is no detail available to prove it, actually, to have some references. And this subject was something we dived into with my colleague, Dr. Lnenickova. She's an art historian, and I looked at the Masonic side, and we tried this sort of white spot in that area of identification of Bohemian Masonic glass to fill that void. And that's what we did. Now just let's have a short walk through World Museum. The Museum of Freemasonry in London, one of the best in the world, with very, very rich collections, always available there. Always you can visit them. And this is just a small peep in the glass box where are the Bohemian glasses. All of them you are seeing on the screen are Bohemian. But if you go to the Musée de la Franc-Maçonnerie in Paris, similarly, again, huge collection of beautiful objects, and also the glasses are, here is a mixture. For example, this one is Bohemian, and this one is also Bohemian. We'll see later the producer of these glasses. The Dutch Museum in The Hague, a smaller one, but with excellent collection of historic documentation. And again, the typical Bohemian glasses of the 19th and early 20th centuries, beautiful colored here, we can see. And the last but not least is our neighbor from Bohemia. This is Freemasonry Museum in Rosenau in Austria, which has also a huge collection of Masonic glasses, and many of them are quite logically, of course, from Bohemia, as it was long one state. The German Masonic Museum, Deutsches Freimaurer Museum, has also a collection of glasses. And when it celebrated its 100 years of existence, the German Post Office issued a stamp which showed 4 or 5 objects from that museum. And the Bohemian Masonic Glass, the one you see on the right here, had the honor and the glory to be depicted on the German postal mark. So this is the glory of the Bohemian glass. Now let's see the origins of this product. We have to go to tape watch. Already immediately in the beginning, the documented beginning of Freemasonry in 1717 and later, we have a picture here from 1730, where brethren, after the ritual part, take the more relaxed part, which is then the joint meal and the joint drinks. They form a chain of hands here, which later was popular on the continent. But what is interesting for us is, of course, the bottle and the glasses. The glasses look like common glasses of that period. Maybe at that moment, still the ritual drinking were not yet fully developed. Another picture a few years later shows us a more formal composition, the worshipful master on the right, the senior and junior warden on the left, the situation as it was with the Premier Grand Lodge in the early days, and the situation as was developing in the continental Freemasonry. Interesting is to know that the table shows the rest of the tracing board, which was probably drawn on it. It's partly cleaned up, and the 3 lesser lights are seen on the tent. But again, the important part for me is here, they hold, again, the glass is ready to take a toast. We move across the channel to France, to Paris, a few years later again, about 10 years, and we see a French lodge at a table. As usual, the French cooking is excellent, always been, always will be, and the table looks quite generous. With a lot of food. Music will be played probably later if the musician takes part. And again, we see a lot of bottles. Nearly every few bits and pieces you see there a bottle. But most important is the small glass. Look, every brother has in front of him a small glass, and it's in a cylindrical form. And these are the early first firing glasses, as they have been later called on the continental Europe cannons. Somewhat later, in the mid-19th century, you see another festive board in France, in Paris. It became quite elegant and sophisticated. The glasses used are champagne flutes. This wouldn't be a Masonic firing glass. This is just a common drinking glass for champagne. The Masonic elements are here is the decoration of the wall, and quite remarkably is that the worshipful master, the chairman of the meeting, stands with his toes under a canopy. which normally would be in a lodge room, but here it's in the dining room. And the canopy is a symbol which enhances the importance of the person under it. This is a very famous painting by the German painter Lovis Corinth. He was himself a Freemason. He lived around 1900, and he was member of a lodge in Munich. The lodge was named In Treue Fest, the ITF. You can find the initials of the lodge on the top. It means firm in loyalty. And the painting's name, official name, is actually Toast in the Lodge, firm in loyalty. There are 12 brethren here to see. In the middle, we see the worshipful master. And again, I like to put your attention to his right hand, where he's holding a very classical, typical firing glass of these days, a smaller one with a very heavy, thick foot, which can be used by symbolic drinks and banging on the table, which is part of the drinking ritual. It's quite nice to see. Exactly. Some other brethren have normal glasses, but the worship master really has a classical canon. There are a few more pictures about lodge meetings for festive boards or table lodges. This is in Germany, Berlin. On the wall, you see in the painting of the German Emperor Wilhelm I. He was a Freemason, as was his son. So the German lodges would keep in their rooms the portraits of these emperors. Now, these were sort of traditional rooms as we see them still today. On the 8th of August in 1925, there was a unique happening in the London Olympia to collect money for the new Masonic Hall, Peace Monument, it was called at that time. There was a charity lunch to raise money, and it was attended by 7,250 brethren, a huge amount. And that demanded about 8 kilometers of tables, 50,000 plates, 1,250 waitresses. And there was a normal, full-blown 5-course menu, and it was served all in 1 hour. Nearly 1,825,000 sterling was collected, and for a long period, maybe still today, it's the largest lunch in Europe ever done. On the right hand, you see a medal. Members who attended it would receive for their contribution. And this is the menu. Again, it's called Masonic Million Memorial Festival Fund, for which the contribution was meant. A nice, full French style, of course, menu. And this is how the room looked like. I can't believe nowadays that you could manage such a large happening. And still, I can't believe they managed the 5-course menu in 1 hour. But big London restaurants are really capable of mega things. So yeah, I think it's correct. This is a festive board, again, in a traditional way in Prague in the 30s. It's most likely a German-speaking lodge. And typical menu cards made for lodge meetings. On the left-hand side is a very special one that was done for the occasion of the opening of the mausoleum for Comenius in the Dutch city of Naarden. A large delegation of nearly 30 Czech Freemasons traveled to Holland, and after the opening were hosted in The Hague by the oldest Dutch lodge, Lodge l'Union Royale, which was founded in 1735. And as a memory for that evening, this lunch menu was printed. The other one is for 75 years of a Prague lodge, most of which I remember. Now, the glasses, because that's the subject. We have seen there are Masonic dinner parties, or in England they call it festive board. It could be also called table lodge. The French call it agape. In German, it's called weiße Tafel. And they have different forms. Could be quite ritual, only for members. It could be more informal, without a ritual, or it could be sort of public with guests or ladies. So there are different forms. Depends on the occasion. Now, the ritual for the drinks is something which we know definitely from 1737. That time, there was a report by a police prefect in Paris, Mr. René Rowe, who was chasing Freemasons at that time, unwanted in France, and so they were persecuted. And the police got a sort of report how these Masons do their ritual work, and it was published in a sort of abbreviated form. And it gave actually a complete ritual of initiation, followed by a meal and festive board and the drinks ceremony for the toast. It was quickly translated in Dutch, Germany, and the description is actually the first one we know about the details about Masonic Toast and the Masonic fire. I must say here, the Masonic Toast is then that you have a small glass. We'll see more of them, and you have seen already a few pictures in which there is a ritual that you take on command of the worshipful master. You take in 3 times a sip to empty your glass, and then these 3 triangles in front of you, you finish by a triangle going down to the table and bang them several times on the table, which makes a lot of noise, like a cannon is shot, and that is then called the cannonade, or making fire. And the trick is to do it very simultaneously. So if everybody does it at precisely the same timing, that generates a lot of pleasure and a good effect. And that is an element which contributes to the conviviality of the evening. And this description, which I'm just telling you now, and these habits are still applied in several lodges today, is in full detail described already in 1737, and not much changed since then. That's quite remarkable. Not much later, this is a book sort of published in London, but in the 40s, 1740s, in France were published sometimes in Amsterdam, sometimes in England. There were French books, and there were so-called exposures. Exposure that the author, the publisher, wants to expose Masonic rituals with all the details. And it's an interesting series of publications, and there are some illustrations. And this one is from La Maison de Marseille, 1751. And I consider this an important one for my story, because apart from the usual symbols of the worshipful master, the junior deacon, the junior warden, senior warden, and the usual symbols, we see here the first time described in detail 3 subjects or objects which are important for the festive board. This is a decanter for wine. This other one is decanter for water, and in the middle is the firing glass, the cannon, and is precisely described as a cannon in the description which is in the book. So this is actually the first time we see formal description and depiction of a firing glass, a very simple one, but probably sturdy enough to survive the firing toast. There is, by the way, the idea that it originated probably in France, and the early Breton apparently took it from military habits. So that in the military, similar or very similar ritual drinks have been done, and the Masons took it over and adopted it. And from then on, it came to the rest of Europe and Britain. And for having a firing a toast and ending with hitting the glass on the table, you need a sturdy glass. And these meetings took place in inns and pubs, public places. So the innkeeper had to make sure that the glass would survive it. Here you see very early English firing glasses, which could be also used for other society, not only Masonic. Drinking toast is a standard social habit, so it's not exclusive Masonic. So these glasses were probably generally used. And here you see one right-hand side down, which has a thicker foot, which could be used already for these symbolic drinking and hitting the table. These other wouldn't survive. So I wouldn't call them Masonic firing glasses. Now, in the early days, you would have just a glass, that's it, you don't need more. If more different lodges would meet in the same place, they might start making a mark on it, the number of the lodge or some symbol to distinguish between the different glasses. And one step further, the name of the lodge and some Masonic decoration could go on it. And so gradually you see Masonic glasses develop heavily decorated. But primarily the function is in the firing toast and the ability to hit the table. And for that reason, you need the thick foot, and that makes the original purpose firing glass of Freemasons. And I want to make that distinction very clear, because here you see on the left-hand side a typical firing glass with a thick foot and not too big, because you have to empty it in 3 sips. On the right, you see a festive glass, a decorative glass. There are thousands and thousands made of those, which were nicely decorated, could be used for wine, for anything. And often, if they were very elaborately decorated, they would be used basically more as a noble present. So we have to distinguish, these festive glasses are not capable of withstanding hits on the table. And so that's a category of festive glass or decorative or commemorative glass. It's sometimes for a jubilee, for a birthday, reaching a certain stage of your Masonic career, and so on and so forth. Typical English glass from the 19th century. As I told you, on the right, you see a small Masonic decoration and just an engraved number 473. Here is the name of the lodge and the lodge number. That would be a sort of very simple, basic time to be practical, basically. In Holland, and also, by the way, in Germany, and also in England, you find is the model on the left side, which is a kind of trumpet with a thick foot. It's a quite elegant shape, I must say. It has the triangular form of the trumpet. Is very easy to decorate with basic Masonic symbols, a triangle, square, compasses, and sometimes the name. On top, you have here Silencio et Fide, which is the words, the slogan of the Dutch Grand Lodge of Holland. On the right hand, you see a glass from Rotterdam, 1801, which is typically a decorative glass. But it's very, very beautifully made. It was made for a grain trader who was a Freemason, member of a lodge in Rotterdam. And it is done by the diamond point engraving system. It's diamond points, which is a very special technique. Dutch were masters at it, and a very small group of artists who could do it. This one is named Adam, and there are 8 or 9 of these type of glasses known of him, but this is the only one which is Masonic, shows a lady with Masonic symbols and so forth. It's very beautiful. It's owned by the Museum of Freemasonry in Holland. And I think from art point of view, it's maybe the most beautiful one I know. Artistically, the decoration is excellent. Now we have to come to the Masonic symbols. You have seen already the glasses I just showed you that there are symbols on it. we have to assume that the engravers or the glass decorator who brings the symbols on the glasses, engraves it, paints it on it, or another technique, they were artisans who rarely would be a member of a lodge. I'm talking about the 18th century, 19th century, maybe 20th century as well. So these art or the workers basically had to have a model which to follow. And we have just to guess, because we don't know from later days, 20th century, we do have examples of these forms which the artist or the engraver had to follow. But from the early days, this is one of the earliest graphic representations of Masonic symbols. Again, it's been published in one of these French exposures, Catéchisme des Francs-Maçons, 1744. And the left hand is for the first and second degree, and the right hand is for the Master Mason degree. Elements of these could be used later on glasses. Another French exposure from 1747 from Masonic Glasses shows the plan of a fellow crafts lodge. Now, I'm not going into it, what you can see here all, there is a lot to see, but more important here is the form, the shape you see is front view, and see a sort of oblong wall to enclose a kind of symbol of a Temple of Solomon, probably. We'll find this later on glasses. Another interesting artifact is that in England, Britain already in the mid-18th century apparently wore in lodges silver jewels like the one you see in front of you, which would combine a number of Masonic symbols, and it would be just a mark that they are a Freemason, no more probably. This one is again in the excellent collections of the Museum of Freemasonry in London, but the beauty here is it's dated, it's 1763. So maybe such a silver jewel could be for an artist a model inspiration to copy this design on a glass. And now we come to something very important. This is frontispiece for the English publication Yakin and Boas, is an English exposure. It was already 1776, earlier than that year printed. It was very popular and it was reprinted many times. And the year 1776, to boost the sales, the publisher commissioned a frontispiece, and the decoration is the one you see here on the left side. And it is very interesting that the artist, in an oval shape, put more or less all the traditional standard Masonic symbols in the first 3 degrees, put them all neatly together, and made in this way a beautiful decorative document, which was later, in a later edition of the same book, a little bit adjusted. You see it's in an octagon and it's not in an oval anymore, and few items are a little bit rearranged. For example, the coffin was here upstanding and here is lying in front of it, and a few other details, but there are details. But basically this illustration was later many times copied by different artists and applied on different projects, and including Masonic glass. And what also happened is that this medallion was an inspiration for new silver pendants to be worn in lodges. And here you can very clearly see that the style and the details are clearly taken from that oval. He couldn't squeeze all the elements which in the graphic was, but most of them there are, and very strongly following the example on the left. In France, the Moustier factory produced a beautiful series of plates, and they are called the service with the 25 Masonic symbols. where the artist took this symbolism is probably from the French prince, but it's a very beautiful one. It was even copied in the Austrian lands, in Slovakia, in a China, or in a factory which belonged to the husband of Maria Theresa, Franz Stefan, who was himself a Freemason. And here you can very clearly recognize the medallion, the octagonal medallion, which was sent by the Dutch trading company to Deshima in Nagasaki, which was a trading post of the Dutch. And they commissioned with the Japanese artist boxes, lacquer boxes, and applied the Masonic symbols of that graphic design. They're beautiful. Most big museums have a small collection of those. They are all from period 18, 20, 30, 40, around that period. And here another example of an American application of Masonic symbols, at this time on quilt, where the ladies took great effort to collect a number of symbols on a very, very beautiful quilt. Now, the Masonic glasses from Bohemia. Just artist impression how this traditional process of glass making happened. You had a kiln in the middle, which has to produce a temperature. In the old days, it was no more than 1000 degrees. Nowadays, 14 to 1500 degrees. And the three basic ingredients, sand, soda ash, or potassium, and limestone, were molded till you get a mass which was molten and achieved the structure and quality necessary. And they were, of course, then too hot to blow glass object of it. So they went to a second cooling kiln, which is next to it, that was heated by the residue heat from the main one. And after the temperature lowered to 300 degrees, then the glass blower would blow a product of it. And that's actually the whole process. There are some equipment to make the shapes and the form, and then it's the product, and then you can decorate it with all sorts of systems. Here is just a small example of a wheel which can engrave. So the production goes in two main portions. You can add a third one maybe as well. I just explained the production itself, that's blowing, or you can press it in a form and to get the final shape. And then it's followed by refining the product. The refining means it could be enameling. So it's a coat added on it, sort of a new layer of glass with a different color, or just a picture can be made by colors, and then they are burnt again on it, so they are attached to it. Another one, the color on the object. And then another one is a very popular one, is cutting to do the basic shape. So you can change the shapes from a conical one to an octagonal glass, for example. We'll see later examples. Engraving is a very popular one, but it's very laborsome, so it's really costly. And acid etching is another one, which is a little bit easier, and it later is being applied a lot. Now, it's good to understand that a manufacturer could do all three processes: do the production, do the refining, and do the selling and distribution. That's happened in the old days. But gradually, in the late 17th, mid 18th century, it became specializations. And if you look to Bohemia or the Czech lands, which you see here on the map, it's not the best one, but I have to explain that the border areas, here the north and the south is bordering with Austria and Bavaria, the north with Saxony and Silesia. These are all mountains, and there is the glass industry concentrated, because the most important element is energy, heat, and that's done by burning wood. So living in wooden areas would be useful or necessary to have all the energy available nearby. The southern part developed later mainly as kilns which would produce glass. North Bohemia did the same, but there were areas which developed around Haida and Stein, Schönau, and other places which would be specializing in decoration. So there would be firms who just buy the raw material, the glasses, and do the decoration themselves and the trade. Or the trader would be a completely separate function who will buy complete production lines and then sell it worldwide. Important to mention that the Bohemian glass industry, which, by the way, were all German speakers. The border areas were German speakers, so the interaction with Saxony, with Silesia in the north, or Bavaria and Austria in the south was very strong, and there was free flow of experts back and forth. So it's actually kind of Central European area, but Bohemia is of course a political area. So on that side, we can still identify it as Bohemian glass. Around 1792, about 80 glass manufacturers were there, and about 1,500 employees. In the 19th century, it was more industrial, but then the trade and all things around expanded. So at some days it was 30,000 and up to 200,000 in late 19th, early 20th century. So it was a significant industry, an important one. And just to show the reach, how far the sales went, already in the early 17th century, there were, or mid 18th century, in 38 harbor cities, the Bohemian glass traders would have a depository and an office, sales office. And all European large cities would have a sales office of the glass business. New York, Baltimore, Mexico, South America, Cairo, Beirut, Smyrna, everywhere would be representatives of the Bohemian glass industry. And that was the strong part. That's why they pushed it so far away in the world. And this is what made the Bohemian glass so famous. In the Arts and Crafts Museum in Prague is this glass, and it's probably around 1760, 1770. It's most likely from a North Bohemian glass manufacturer. It's called Neuwelt, New World, and it would belong to the Count Harrachs. It was an old noble family who had lands, and one of these lands was developed glass industry, and the manufacturer is operating still today. And this is the one which is the first one when we see a series of decorations which were later on Bohemian glasses always repeated, many times corrupted. The original picture was lost, and then the copier and the third, fifth, 10th copier would change it all the time. And let's just go through it. You see here about 8 different themes. Here is the one which is the Temple of Solomon, and maybe you remember one of these graphic French graphics from 1747 showed these kind of arrangement of the Temple of Solomon. On the other one, we see the chair of the worshipful master. It's called the chair of King Solomon. It's a canopy, again, the canopy to enhance the importance of the seat and the importance of the function and the person who sits on it. Another one is reflecting it is still here. It's a kind of coffin. On top of it is a hexagram with a G, a really Masonic symbol, and it shows a number of skeletons. It is a reflection of the 3rd degree, and the tracing board for the 3rd degree of the very old days could have been a kind of inspiration with a small adjustment. Later, it has been corrupted into a chapel. then a cross comes on it. It's quite interesting. Another one here, left lower row shows traditional symbols of the different officers in the lodge. The one here is a gate, reminds of the Royal Arch symbols and decoration. We'll see later a graphic design which is very similar to this one. And you see the three ashlars, perfect ashlar. So this glass is most likely a sort of binding one, first one. Unfortunately, we don't know where exactly the engraver took the symbols from, but probably a mixture of documents. One specific thing I like to pin your interest on is on the first one here. Here you see a rod, and on it are two pair of gloves and a Masonic apron. That you will see on the first English medallions from 1776. There are a pair of gloves and a apron. And the artist, he clearly didn't know how to place it, what to do with it. So he took it like laundry and put it on a line. And you will find it later many times copied. So it's quite a very funny misconception how artists who didn't understand the trade changed things. This is quite an interesting product from North Bohemia, but also in Germany. It was made in Thuringia. It's glass, but it's white glass or milk glass. There's a mixture added to the glass, so it becomes a milk glass. It was an effort by the glass industry to compete with the then popular porcelain, which came from Sachsen, from Meissen, but the competition was not successful. So it was a brief period, about 20 years late, early 20th century, that this milk glass was made. But anyway, this is a beer mug. It's a big one. This one is in the museum in Austria, but London has also a number of these things. And this one looks like Bohemia. The ones in London are probably more from a German stock. The Prague Arts and Crafts Museum has a beautiful collection of 6 glasses which show scenes from the Magic Flute. They are very early, around 1800 probably, and they're very charming. They are, of course, not directly Masonic, but as we all believe that the Masonic flute is an opera very strongly inspired by the Freemasonry, so I added it to the Masonic glasses. We know only of one series of 6 pieces. I haven't seen it ever before and somewhere else. So maybe it was made by an order, probably South Bohemia glassworks made it. Now, Classicism in Bohemia, after the Napoleonic time, a short period that you can call it Classicism, you see the sort of strict classical style. It was later will be followed by Biedermeier. And here you see again what we see before, a view on the temple of Salomon, and again the gloves and the apron hanging on a rod like laundry, and the similar ones repeated here. But they're quite nice, elegant glasses, I must say. It's a similar glass, and I'm showing here the Salmon's chair, the master chair, and here on the left you see a graphic representation of the same subject. So maybe the artist who did these glasses had some kind of print, like I show you here on the left. We are now in the Biedermeier period. This is, by the way, a period that Freemasonry was not functioning. From 1795, Freemasonry in Vienna and in Prague was not legal, and lodges did not operate, but these glasses were still made and exported. This is a very beautiful one from North Bohemia. that the engraving is really excellent. It shows St. John the Baptist, important for Freemasons, and in front of him is a whole collection of Masonic symbols. Jablonet, or Gablon, German, is another important industrial city in North Bohemia, which was famous for glass beads, for glass decorations, costume jewelry, Christmas tree decorations, and they produced a quite unusual series of glasses in a conical shape, as you see, and they would have a band, textile band, on which Okan, what is that sound? Could somebody put his microphone off? Okay, thank you. There's a textile band on which ladies, it was cottage work with needles and with these beads create these decorative bands. Here we see it sort of rolled out. It's made by order. Many times there would be initials of the owner. But what is most important, we found a company owned by Wilhelm Wanke, who did this type of glass. We don't know whether he made this exactly one, but they were both members of a lodge in Germany, in Zittau, which is just a half-hour driving from the city where this one was, Gablons. So they were Freemasons, so maybe in their company it was made. Well known in a lot of musea own that are these small purses. It's made the same technique, knit in glass. Glass beads are stitched to textile, and this purse was made for carrying maybe jewels or gloves, or maybe even an apron could be folded into it. But the point is, it's the same technique as the bead glass decoration on the glasses. Another company of Karl Goldberg was a glass entrepreneur from the years half 19th century up to the 30s. He was member of a lodge in Dresden, some Golden Apfel, and he was innovative in his business. He developed different sort of glass decorations and coloring. You see here 3 wonderful, very prestigious, very noble made goblets. And the medallion on front of it is very clearly derived from that famous one, which was in the frontispiece print of 1776. Here is another Biedermeier type glass, which shows a decoration which is very clearly derived from the second, the octagonal medallion, which was the model for the engraver for this glass. The museum in Kamenický Chernov, on Czech, it's or German, it's Stein-Schönau, another important center of glass industry, and it has a lovely small glass with these Masonic symbols on it, and the model for it could have been, for example, a invitation. It's a lodge summons from a Berlin lodge. On the left you can see where you see similar symbols, the globe, the square, compasses, and other symbols. So that kind of inspiration probably has been used for this glass. Now we come to a very important model. In sort of around 1870-80, it's certainly Julius Mühlhaus, an important glass refining and glass trading company in Bohemia, developed these kind of glasses. It has an egg-shaped form. It's inspired on the old German Römer glass, but it tries to combine it with a thick foot. So it's a kind of hybrid approach where you still try to make it a firing glass, which technically you could use to hit the table and to have a drink. But the glass is quite large, and if you fill it, you won't ever be able to drink it in 3 sips empty. And hitting the table with this big one is probably not so comfortable and not convenient. So in the end, they are more decorative. But they were very, very popular. The ranges of them have been made in different colors. And the decoration is always more or less the same series we have seen on the very first glass from the Harrach kiln in the late 18th century in Bohemia. We have identified these Julius Mühlhaus firm. There are stickers, you see it here on the left, which show the name of the firm. And they clearly traded it. The document, we know it's from the 30s. But this glass was made so between 1870, 90, up to 1930, so a very long period. This is one which is done in complete blue. It's a blue coat, actually. So the translucent glass has been covered by a color blue, and then it's again by polishing it, you remove it and get the foot is then a translucent part again. Another set is red and gold. This was probably an expensive one, but probably very popular because it's a very nice combination, of course, and maybe members of the Scottish Rite, where the red color is important, would prefer these ones. And now we come to a second most important glass of the modern times, which in Bohemia was produced. And this is a sort of conical glass with a thick foot. And the conical form is then formed into a 6-sided, sometimes 7-sided, and sometimes 8-sided shape. There are differences. The most popular and the most common one and the most easy one to make is 6 sides. On the left, you see an unfinished product where the polishing was done but not completed on the iris steel mat, and it needs further processing. So this is a semi-finished product, you see. On the right, you see the finished one. Here, a very small one. It's really very, very small. It's about 4 centimeters high, quite nice one. You can easily put it in your pocket. And here again, you can see the very often the repeated sort of arch with a checkered floor, 3 candles and a triangle. If you look to the tracing board on the left, again, this arch, 3 candles, checkered floor. And this is not a triangle, but it's the all-seeing eye, which sometimes is put in a triangle. So the inspiration might have been from these kind of sources. And this shows that this glass, German was called Klotzuskanone, was very popular, and you would have them in many shapes and form. And many, many years they were produced till today, actually. The thick foot was also very convenient to engrave names of persons who would be receiving it, or name of a lodge, if a lodge wanted to have it on its name, or any other dedication could be nicely put on the foot. So this is a very practical and very popular model. The famous Czech Art Nouveau artist Alphonse Mucha was very active in Freemasonry in Czechoslovakia in the interwar period. And he designed 4 major crystal goblets with Masonic symbols, one for the 3rd degree, one for the 18th degree, one for the 30th of Scottish Rite. And this one you can see here is for the 33rd degree of Scottish Rite. Left you see just a postcard of it. On the right is the original thing. They are very beautiful, well made, and full of symbolism. Only few have been made. My guess is maybe there's a series of 4. Huh? Maybe that 2, 3, 4 series have been made, no more. Unfortunately, we know only 3 of which we can make good pictures, and the 4th one we have only on old postcards. The idea was to use it indeed as a prestigious present for foreign visitors. Probably Mucha donated to the Scottish from the southern jurisdiction, the sovereign commander at the 30s who visited Prague probably would receive one. It was Coles, John Henry Coles, and maybe in the Washington archives is such a goblet, but we don't have access to it, unfortunately. And here is a small example how an artist would draw the decoration, which later the engraver had to follow with his instrument and engraving. The left one is from 1921, and it's a glass, a goblet or a drinking glass made for a German lodge in Bautzen, to then Goldenen Mauer at the Golden Wall, and probably for a member because the name is here. So it was a member of that lodge, and they ordered it at Urtel, Johann Urtel in Haida, Novi Bor. The lodge exists today. It was revived. It was in the old East Germany, and it's still active. So it's quite nice. And on the right, another standard Masonic decoration for a glass, how they did it. Here is a sheet from a sample book of a glass trader, where he shows his, it is North Bohemia, it could be also from Silesia, the progress, could be a mix. But here on the top left, you see 2, 4, 6, 8 Masonic glasses of that date. It must be around, I think, 1910, 20, something like that. On the left is a sampler of a Silesian glass company who would produce the raw material, the glass. You can again see the shape. The Klotfußkanon is a very popular one. It's the first 2 models. And here you see the egg-shaped one. That, again, were the 2 which were most demanded. And on the right, you see standard advertisements of traders in Leipzig or Berlin who offer Masonic glasses for their members. And again, you see...
Brother Jaap, it's time to wrap up.
Okay. Here's another advertisement on in Bohemia. That's the shop. That's one which is in New York, which is produced by Neffe in Windberg and donated by the Grand Lodge Lessing in Prague to New York at its anniversary in 1931, and it's still in the collections in New York. And this is modern. I'm showing you quickly few modern Czech glasses made in the last 20 years. The Grand Lodge on the left and the Lodge Mucha on the right. Lodge Comenius, where the first stage of the production, finished product and a leather container. A modern design of a glass by Petr Larva, a Czech glass designer who tries to make a modern style. These are another series of very modern style glasses which try to approach the traditional firing glass. And a heavy glass by Lodge Gotchard with a container to it. And we had an exhibition on the Masonic glasses in Klatovy several years ago. It brought all the material together. Good pictures have been made at that time, and that all resulted with 3 years hard work in a book which summarizes it all, which is called Bohemian Masonic Glass. It's in 2 languages, and it covers everything we have seen and much, much, much more. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Jaap, for a most interesting view into a part of Masonic culture that for some Masons may be strange and for others are part of the ritual whenever visiting a Masonic meeting. I will now open up for questions to our presenter. Please remember to raise your virtual web hand on the chat or the chat possibility on your screen, and you will be able to put your question to Brother Sadilek. I'll start up myself. How about today? How is it possible to obtain Masonic glasses? Are they expensive, and how do you purchase them?
Well, there are standard glasses for sale in English, German, Czech glass traders, which would be using basically standard produced glasses and decorated by a sand-blasted or easier, cheaper methods to put square compasses or a G or something like on it. So that would be one, I would say, standardized product. They would cost not much more than usual set of whiskey glasses and a decanter. And the other series is, of course, custom made, that you order it. And what I have shown, they are all custom made. Then you have to find a artist in Czech Republic. We have, I know about 2 or 3 or even 4 maybe, designers who can design a shape of a glass, decoration in consultation. I had 3 replicas made a time ago of how I wanted to. It came to, now it's in coronas, in 2000, say 100 euro per glass.
Okay, other questions?
Currently no questions, Helge.
I don't have other questions on my chat.
Everything easy? Well, let me add that by, say, my research and my colleague, I must still stress that this work is a joint one with my colleague Lnenickova, who is an expert on glass. She published many books, so she knows the producers, she knows the archives and industry. Only the subject masonry was new to her, so we had to cooperate. But we did find, for example, a lot of these glass producers in North Bohemia. We could trace in the end the Masonic memberships in mostly German lodges across the border. Again, distant from these North Bohemian glass centers to Germany, to Saxony, or to Silesia. It's really 30, 40 kilometers from the major cities. And so it's really half an hour, and the borders were quite open at that time. So they could easily be Masonic members in those parts and to be producers. So that was really a discovery. And in our book, we have a whole summary of persons who are in the glass industry and Freemasons summarized. So that's sort of new discoveries. And there is a growing interest in the lodges here to order glasses for occasions, round jubilees, 100-year centenary, and so. So there is an effort to try to revamp the industry, but it remains, of course, quite exclusive for small numbers and exclusive, and hence, unfortunately, it's quite expensive. The glass reaches then the level of a luxury object of prestige, and not the practical one. I try now, because my lodge will celebrate in a few years' time 100 years. most. It was established 1925. And I would like to try to develop a new firing glass which would fulfill all the functions for a traditional firing toast, with which you can bang on the table and everything. To find a shape which reflects that function, which allows small, decent decorations which can carry the name of the lodge or the owner or some Masonic symbols, but remain practical. And so not to overblow it, to make it one big decorative piece which you put in a cabinet and look at it and don't use it. But that's quite a tall order, because the conflict between decorativeness and practicality is not an easy one to bridge. That's a nice challenge.
You are an international Freemason, Brother Jaap. How would you compare how glassware is being used ritual in different lodges around the world? Is the Czech Republic special because they have Bohemian glassware history? Or is it more or less as it is, let's say, in England or in Germany or wherever?
Well, I would say the very traditional firing toasts, as I described them, so are unfortunately nearly nobody ever does it anymore, very exceptionally. I haven't experienced that nor in England, nor in Holland, nor in Germany, Austria, Czech Republic, in Croatia, and other places. So I think in England, I know best is the taking the fire from me, and it's clapping your hands mostly. And that is repeated sometimes in other continental lodges, but it's mostly actually England, and only recently in some lodges in Prague trying to use it, but they followed mostly the German and Austrian model of toasting. So I must push my worshipful master to say, why don't we do a Masonic fire? Oh yeah, okay. But it's not enough sort of standard. So one has to push it. And if he is sort of willing and pushes it and say, okay, we'll do it, and we do 1, 2, 3 more of these toasts to him or him, then everybody starts liking it, because the joint exercise of hitting the table with the glass, trying to be synchronic, is a big fun. It's big fun. And so it needs to sort of some active people to push it, and then it gets through. But the tradition is in this country same as Germany and Austria.
I see. I invite you to a meeting in the Swedish right somewhere in Scandinavia. We are firing all the time. Brother Jan Snook has a question.
Well, not quite a question, but a remark. I want to thank Jaap for filling in a gap in our scholarly knowledge. They are so beautiful that nobody throws them away. So there are quite a lot, but we know hardly anything about them. And what you found out about them is very, very well valuable. So thank you very much for doing it.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Any final remarks from your side?
I think Roche Martin is raising his hand.
Okay. Thank you, Brother Jaap, for a most interesting view into a part of Masonic culture that for some of us is Masonic ritual, and for others is a new topic. It seems that this sequence of questions is moving towards an end. On behalf of the organ,
to end, people have interest to get deeper into it, I just briefly showed the book, you know, if you want this one. You can use on the chat is my email address, jacob@sadilek.org. If you write me an email, then we can arrange supplying the book.
Fair enough. On
I just-
behalf of,
I just quickly want to say that in Belgium, in my lodge, we are bumping with these glasses also on the table. So it's not just in Germany and a few other countries, of course, in Czechia, but we also do it regularly and quite a lot. And we like to do it. And the noise it makes, of course, is very inspiring.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to hear, because I think it should be done all the time and everywhere. So happy it happens. Just thank you.
okay, on behalf of the organizers, I will again thank Brother Sadilek for his lecture, and to all of you out there for participating. I bid you good night from Norway, and take care out there.